Welcome, everyone. Any public comment this evening? Any comment from the board? All right, well, we'll dig right in. Our first appointment is 733 Mass Ave for more than one dwelling on a lot.
Yep. That's us. My name's Steve Barkley. I'm the,
Sir, if you could just approach the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
my name's Dave Bardsley. I represent 733 Mass Ave. I live out in Orange, Mass. I'm the project manager for 733 Mass Ave. And with me is Alf Berry. He's the engineer on the project. So he can answer those detailed questions that I can't. Okay. And then the homeowner is Tuan Duo, and he's in the audience as well.
If
You all get a copy of the proposed, I think he dropped that off.
Yes.
Yeah.
So obviously, this particular property comes up because you guys are meeting with for the property next door. So we've, on this plan that we've sent you guys, it has the easement for those guys as well, so they can get a better view for their driveway, more safety aspect on that corner. You can see from our plan, I don't know, probably all have been by the project because it's a few hundred feet down the road, but we put in a driveway when we put in the new sewer system, sewer lines. So we already have our cleanouts and stuff set up for additional homes had we get our approval here. So we're proposing, there's an existing home on the property now. That one is about 2,400 square feet. We're proposing 3 additional homes, one up towards the road, 2 more towards the back. Those that are familiar, there used to be about a 15,000 square foot barn that was falling down that the chief of the fire department begged us to tear it down. So we kindly did that. And so what we're looking to do is utilize space that was already being used for commercial purposes and set it up so that we can turn it more into residential. We're going to put, our proposal is for 3 additional 1,700 to 2,000 square foot homes back there, spread out evenly so that they'll each have about a half-acre lot. And our intent is to call it a PUD. They'll share the driveway so that we don't have multiple driveways coming off. They'll all share the same one coming onto the street. And we definitely believe that once the easement is taken care of from the property owners next door, that we think that that'll be the safest way to put this proposal in place. And so, questions?
Anyone from the board have questions?
I thought that we weren't allowed to have more than one dwelling on a lot.
Well, the bylaw allows the planning board to approve more than one dwelling on a lot. I don't think it's something the board has done regularly outside of things like PRAs or the multiple, I always forget what it's called. The section before the PRA where you can do multiple housing types on a lot, and both of those have minimum lot requirements which are in excess of the 4 acres.
My concern with the project, I understand the concept, but it is completely contrary to what we've done in the past, and I believe contrary to the intent of our bylaws. So I have significant concerns about the proposal, as well as the common drive. You're proposing one drive for 4 lots, and would you be proposing a homeowners association, or how would the care and maintenance be done for the driveway and the sewer line?
Yeah, our goal is to set it up like a planned urban development or condo type situation, similar to what they're proposing for next door, where they're going to have an association fee that takes care of essentially any common area and the driveway maintenance throughout the throughout the, fall and winter time. We do these, again, I'm from Orange. We do these all the time out there. Could be, we'll put 2 homes on one lot, on 1 quarter-acre lot, and then we'll just have 1 driveway. They'll have an association fee that essentially takes care of the driveway.
Have you reviewed our zoning bylaw?
I personally haven't. The engineer, I'm not.
It's conflicted on that sort of thing. So
That's why we, found it
that's why we're asking
important to
for
come.
guidance more than anything.
Our big, the obstacle, I understand what you're saying, is putting multiple houses, it's kind of going completely against what your zoning bylaws are. But we're hoping that based on the extenuating work that was done here in order to really take an eyesore out of the way, that was much more massive compared to what we're looking to do now. And, obviously when that was a commercial building, you had bigger trucks coming in and out of there, delivery trucks and other things. So we're thinking that this is, far in a better position than what it was.
A question about common driveways, Adam. Do we have a limit to the number of houses on a common driveway?
We do. So, I think there's some confusing language being used because common driveway is a term of art in our bylaw, and it describes this particular situation where 2 individual lots are sharing a driveway that is intended to split both lots, be half on one lot and half on the other. This isn't a common driveway, it's a driveway for 4 dwelling units placed on a single lot. So I think, and I did meet with the homeowner, and we talked a lot about this, and I, said that this is something that I didn't think this board would really look at and say, yeah, this is awesome. I suggested that if it were a condominium with the buildings connected, that approval would go through the zoning board, and this board would look at it for site plan and stormwater and all of the fun technical things that go along with that. I think from my recollection of our meeting, the obstacle in that was there was significant investment in rehabbing the existing home and adding on to that home to create a townhouse style development was potentially a problem. So the thought, I think, is this is sort of mirroring what's happening at 7-Eleven, but in a disparate sort of way where it's spread throughout the lot. My concern, and I did voice this to the homeowner, was even if the board was like, you know what, this is a great use for this lot, we can find a way that this works, in 2, 3, 4 years, this could be seen as a nonconformance, and under the A&R statute, we could be required to separate it into 4 separate lots, being that the 4 separate nonconforming lots would be potentially a better nonconforming use than 4 individual homes on a lot. And condo documents are often able to be modified and altered by a majority of the ownership group. So there are certainly some potential issues in allowing 4 large or medium-sized, I guess these days, homes to be located on a single parcel. And I think the board is right. Our bylaw certainly does have language in it that can be interpreted, and I would interpret it to be the board has the ability to approve something like this. I haven't seen the board do it in the 7 years I've been here. And that's, I think, for a variety of reasons, but one of them being there's a lack of control after it's constructed on what happens. If the buildings are all connected, the separation of that into separate lots becomes a much more unlikely possibility.
Well, and then there's the flurry of 2-acre lots that we're gonna get applications for 4 houses on.
Well, that also.
Yeah, I'm not interested in that at all. So you did see the development next door. What made you choose not to go through the process that they went through?
Mostly because we believe that under the circumstances of this property, that the property next door at 7-Eleven, that's completely undeveloped land. This at one point was fully developed as a commercial space. So utilizing it, now taking it from a commercial space into a residential space and using a much smaller footprint than what was already there, you know, and our thought was that that was a much better use of that property. And I can understand that the board has, you know, their limitations or their hesitation, I should say, in approving something like this. But I think that when you look at it from a much broader scope, is that this was literally, all this property was almost fully developed. It was, you know, utilized almost, I mean, we've shrunk it down by a third by what we're proposing compared to what was there.
This used to be part of that 24 acres behind it, and it was forested, and it was lumbered. It was a lumber mill. It's been a bus yard. It's been a number of things.
I think when the current owner got it, it was mostly a junkyard. There was a lot of stuff that had to be taken out of there.
I bought steaks from them less than a year ago.
There were
You know,
a
and
lot
we
of
went,
parts waiting for a purpose.
Yeah, that's true, too.
And we went through conservation when we demolished the building that was there. Did it in an eco-fashion way. We didn't take it to a landfill. It was all ground up and turned into bark mulch. So, you know, we're trying to do it as tearing that down, we did it in an eco-friendly way, and we're trying to make sure that now what goes back there is, it utilizes this land for a much better purpose than what it was being used for.
Well, I certainly appreciate all the work that's gone into the house, because I think you did a very tasteful job of renovating a old home. It certainly looks the part. I share the concern of other members of the board in terms of developing more dwellings on a single lot. You know, the bylaw's intent is to allow a single property owner to add an accessory dwelling for in-laws, family members, but those dwellings are really meant to be an accessory to the existing dwelling. In this case, I feel like these 3 additional dwellings would be, that command the most of the square footage on the lot. And I'd also be concerned about, you know, long-term, how do you make a model like this work in terms of condo associations and so on.
You know, when I look at it from the standpoint of what's going next door, it's approximately twice the size, but they're looking to do twice as many units. You know, because ultimately in the end, they're looking for 4 double units. So they've got 8, so, you know, their traffic flow and different things like that. I felt like what we were proposing, I know it's on a 2-acre lot, but, you know, it's obviously going to be, I guess, equal to what that would be in the end. And you know, when you made the comment about what we've done with that project, with the home that's currently there, that's what we intend on doing with the others as well, making them fit the town, so that when people come around that turn on a you know, busy road, that those houses that go in there play the part and add value to the town. Definitely tax revenue.
I have to disagree there, too.
I would disagree.
I would disagree.
Because frequently, just single-family homes often use more in local resources than they pay in taxes. as kids go through the school and everything else. That's just, I mean, that's the numbers game.
Is that something that, if we reviewed it and looked at it from a standpoint of 55 and older?
I can give
It's not
my,
outside the box for us, because, a lot of the folks that are buying new homes today are 55 or older.
I'm in the position that I am maybe less opposed to more urban style and development than some members of the board might be. But I think the issue here is our bylaws don't account for it. And what I don't want to do is say, I see how this could work. Let's just say, sure, because that opens us up to issues in the future. That I'd rather see the town craft bylaws that allow for that allow for a more dense development that I think in the end could lead to more, not affordable housing with capital letters, but housing that's affordable in the town. But what I don't want to do is just do that with a sign of a pen. I want that to be done through the bylaws so that it's something that's actually encoded how we would handle that. So I'm not inclined to approve variances for this right now, even though I'm not opposed to necessarily opposed to the idea of what's happening here.
May I ask a question? When you,
Need to use the microphone.
You're up.
yep, my name's Alf Berry, I'm the land surveyor. When you consider a condominium, if this were a 4-unit condominium, how is that different because the buildings are separate?
Perception.
Just perception?
Well, and also legally, they could dissolve the condominium, and the parcel could be required to be divided into 4 individual lots, because multiple primary uses on a single lot is an extreme nonconformity, whereas dimensional nonconformity is a generally lower level perception through the A&R process, is perceived as less problematic than the multiple primary dwellings, thus is something that the board could be required to pass or endorse as an approval not required plan. Whereas you guys keep comparing this to the project next door at 7-Eleven, those folks went through a special permitting process with the zoning board.
Okay.
They were given a special permit with conditions for a townhouse development. They've created that townhouse development, and this board has approved it for site plan approval and stormwater permitting. So it's not, the folks at 7-Eleven didn't come to this board and have the planning board wave the magic wand and say, yes, go ahead and build. They came here for the technical review of safety, paving, drainage, all of those type of things. And the zoning board granted a special permit for
Got it.
the use.
I understand what you're saying. I'm
And I
just
think
trying to...
that's really the big disconnect that I'm hearing from the members of this board is you're proposing something that isn't necessarily codified in our bylaws, so technically would be prohibited, save this one small section that says the planning board can approve multiple dwellings on a single lot. So these aren't townhouses because by definition in our bylaw, they don't meet the townhouse definition.
Right.
They're single-family homes.
Yeah, I'm just trying, in my head, I'm just trying to think of a place where a condominium has been developed and a town has been forced to create an A&R based on, a nonconformity, basically.
And
I just don't know of any case that's ever happened.
I mean, I don't know of any case where it has either, but I also don't know of any case where it hasn't. Usually when someone creates a condominium, they're going through some sort of planned residential area development. We have an area off of Flat Hill Road called the Village at Flat Hill. Very nice, very expensive, wonderful homes. They live on an exclusive use area that is owned by the association who maintains the roads. But they went through a process outlined in our zoning bylaw and we're given a special permit.
Okay.
And that requires a minimum of 5 acres plus acreage dedicated to each unit. So, it's generally for a larger style of what you're proposing here.
Right.
And I'm not as familiar with the town of Orange, but my understanding is it's an older industrial town, has that more urban aspect to it in some ways, and is probably partially rural. This community has been a farming community for many, many, many years. Over the last 20 has probably become a more residential suburb, but still retains a lot of that rural identity and rural character. And this type of development just isn't something we have codified as permittable.
Okay. Well, I've said my bit. Dave, any more, or?
No, so I'm going to assume that what you're saying is if we want to do something like this, we need to go through the special permit portion of it and see what their ultimate opinion is, and then see if they, are in a position to send it back to here for.
Yes, I don't think the plan you have would be permittable under special permit, though, because the townhouse would be what's permittable under special permit, and it requires the sharing of a vertical wall between units. Doesn't state how many units. You can't have more than 4 in a building, so 2 units in a building qualifies as a townhouse. They just have to have a shared wall. So if you were to use the existing building, build off of that, or marry a unit to that and then have another 2-unit building, that could potentially be permittable. And then you'd have to be back through this board for site plan approval and most likely a stormwater permit. And I would expect that, based on what you're showing here, if you added it all up, you might tip the acre of disturbance and you might be back here for a stormwater permit anyway.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate you guys taking the time and giving us at least some direction in which we need to work into. Thanks.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Rogers.
can I ask a question about 733 Mass Ave and 711 Mass Ave? Is this the old Patton property? 733? Okay.
Yep.
And you mentioned another development. Is that where Sam Costa's house was?
That's on the tree farm parcel between the old family practice and Mr. Patton's house. That field that used to be Christmas trees.
Okay, I'm not aware of any development that's adjacent to the Patton house.
It's not there yet.
It's in the process?
Yes.
I got you. Okay, thank you. Yeah. Sometimes when addresses are given, it's great, but people at home have no idea. And by referencing, the Patton house, people can bring it into perspective.
Yeah.
One last question. To the right on Chestnut Street, I noticed that there are trailer trucks and construction vehicles and stuff parked over there. That's a separate parcel, I believe.
That's a separate parcel. Yep.
Thanks. Yep.
All right. Our next appointment is,
They're not going to be here, so if you want to hold them off, we can talk
Okay.
about that after the folks who've showed up.
okay,
It's a simple informational thing more than anything.
okay. Public hearings, 101 Pleasant Street, which is continued from
I've
August 23rd.
And I've received a request from the engineer to continue this for 2 more weeks.
Okay, so that would be,
That would be 27 September, our next meeting.
I would make a motion to continue the hearing for 101 Pleasant Street to September 27th at 6:35 PM.
I would second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Excellent. 97 and 125 Cross Street and 430 and 440 Mulpus Road continued from August 23rd.
I've also received a request for continuance from the applicant on that.
To September 27th?
Correct.
I would make a motion to continue the hearing for 97 and 125 Cross Street and 430 and 440 Malpas Road to September 27th, 21 at 6:35 PM.
I'll second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And, Mr. Chair, before we move on to C, I would also note that I have received a request for continuance from the applicant and engineer at 360 Flat Hill Road for both hearings.
Okay, so why don't we go ahead and
Continue that one
continue that one,
To
and
the-
that way we've got everything out of the way.
to the 27th?
Correct.
I would move that we continue the, excuse me, 360 Flat Hill Road Scenic Road and 360 Flat Hill Road Stormwater Management Permit, public hearings to the 27th,
And those are all for 6:35?
6:35.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. So now we have 1263 Reservoir Road and 435 Leominster Shirley Road, which is now known as 475 Leominster Shirley Road, I believe,
It probably will be shortly.
otherwise known as Lunenburg Central.
Particular spot you'd like me to set up the board?
Yeah.
Yep, right there.
And if you want to run through the A&R first, that might, yeah, make it quick, and then whatever we dig into with the project doesn't get bogged down and we forget about that.
Which part? Okay, cool, got it, thank you.
So are we going back to the Water District tonight?
We'll circle back to it because they're not going to be here, so. All right, so if you'd like to go over the A&R for us first, and then we can,
Absolutely. Just for the record, Chris Aaronson with Hannigan Engineering, here on behalf of JMC TBG for an A&R. Currently, the property is associated with the Keating property and the Keating operational plants. It is the intent to carve off a approximately 30-acre chunk of land to be associated with the Lunenburg Central project. This is zoned in the OPI district, which requires, I believe, 60,000 square feet, so we're well in excess of area. There's a little bit more than 560 feet of frontage, so plenty of frontage for the property, and access is achieved relatively easily as it's a flat portion of the road with no inhibiting factors for access.
the existing water main that's shown on that plan, is that a town line or is that a Keating's?
It's a
well?
private Keating line.
Okay.
So that's part of the Lunenburg Central project, is that's going to be relocated.
So I'm looking at the review, the response letter from Hannigan Engineering dated August 25th, and this was in response to the review by Jeff Wall. So you have, one of the issues was that there were no trees between Leominster Shirley Road and the truck parking area, and you have added those?
Correct, that's associated with the site plan approval. This is for just the A&R right now.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we're just acting on the A&Rs currently.
Yeah.
So the only thing I see of question is that it landlocks parcel A and B.
That is being purchased by the JMC TBG group and will be consolidated into this lot as well.
Okay, very good.
They've purchased both parcels?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Good move.
Any other questions or concerns on the A and R?
I think so.
Really not.
I don't either. Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to approve the A&R plan for 1,263 Reservoir Road and 435 Leominster Shirley Road, to be known as 475 Leominster Shirley Road.
I have,
I have one point.
Okay.
What's your point? So,
the entire frontage is covered by a utility easement.
Correct, that would be for the water line relocation itself.
It says utility line and pole easement.
And there are also several utility poles that cross the frontage of the property that feed the Keating plant, so that's all being encompassed in one easement.
So we've got something about subdivision requiring less than 30% of the frontage be encumbered by an easement?
But it doesn't actually cover the frontage,
Well,
because it's set back off of the frontage. The frontage is the line between the two sidelines adjacent to the road. So they do have to cross the easement once they've entered the lot, but
they own the frontage.
the frontage is not, the easement isn't over the frontage adjacent to the road.
Yeah. On the plan, it's described as a proposed utility line and pole easement, but I believe those poles are there currently, correct?
Correct, so this is all contingent on site plan approval and construction.
But the poles are there without easement.
Yes,
And the water line isn't there, but will be there.
correct.
The water line that,
The water line that they're removing from the center of the site. So their building isn't on top of it.
but you just said the water line isn't there and will be there.
Correct. So they're going to take this approximate location water line.
Yeah.
They're going to probably just cut and cap. I don't, are you planning on leaving? I mean, whatever, but then they're going to relocate it down here. So this water line is going to go away, and it's going to be in that easement with the poles.
Okay.
So in theory, if that easement was the break of the project, they could relocate it,
Yeah.
albeit.
Which I don't think it is. It's far enough back frontage, but,
why doesn't it?
Mr. Chair, may I say something on this? For the record, Bill Hannigan.
yes, go ahead, Bill.
The pole easement is for the existing poles that feed the Keating property. As we're taking this piece of land away from Keating, we need to protect their rights to get the power over that section of the land. So that's what the pole and power line easement is for. The water line easement to be relocated is anticipated to be relocated towards the front of the property, but will probably not end up being adjacent to the right-of-way, because of the fact that that's also where, through the work we were doing with Rob Oliver, we're going to be expanding, or we're going to be creating an easement along that section of the road for highway purposes. So that, if you look at the new site plan, that water line is now shown kind of going through the middle of the front of the parking lot on the new site plan, and that's where it's anticipated to go. All of this is based on the anticipated location when they actually build it. When they build the water line, and relocate it. We're going to physically locate it and create the easement around it so that it's in an easement where the water line ends up, because there may be other factors that come up both on the JCB side as well as the Keating side that just change it slightly. But the intention is to maintain the water flowing from the pump station to the Keating property. If you look in the middle of the front parking lot portion, you can see the water line easement has now been relocated along that section right there. Right here, exactly.
It runs right
That's where the water line is anticipated to go at this point. Right. But we're not going to establish that easement location until the line is actually constructed. That's part of the agreement between the parties.
It's in the first travel aisle of the parking lot in front of the building. It's the black line that transit, nope,
Water
yep, right
supply
there.
line.
Yep.
So this is-
What we didn't want to do was create an easement, and then when we got through construction, have to create another easement, or relocate the easement that we relocated. So for now, the parties agree that the existing water line location shown on this plan is sufficient to do the transaction with the agreement that they'll relocate the water line at a location similar to what's shown on the site plan. Final location to be determined during construction or once it's actually installed.
So then your utility poles and the water line are not going to be in that single easement that's shown on the A and R?
I don't think they are, no.
Okay, I was wondering why it didn't
I
connect.
wanted to be clear on that, that's all.
What is the proposed 10-foot wide right-of-way easement along the property frontage?
On the site plan?
Yes.
Yeah, that is part of the discussion that we had with the DPW director with respect to having a shoulder area for maintenance of Leominster Shirley Road and the widening that we're proposing. So that's not shown on this plan, on the A&R plan, because it's still being processed right now through the planning board under site plan. Once that's done, that would be created through an 81X plan, not endorsed by the planning board, but just an easement plan essentially. And that would go through the town process for the acceptance of the easement.
So that would be an easement to the town for maintenance?
Correct, yes. And that's at the request of Rob Oliver.
Well, that is at the easement.
That is at the frontage line.
Yes, it's essentially an extension of the right-of-way for highway purposes. But it's not going to be owned in fee by the town, but the easement would be there.
So a portion of our bylaw stipulates that I believe it's no more than 30% of the frontage of the lot can be encumbered by an easement. And so Adam's going to go ahead and look up that specific language to make sure that before we proceed, we don't put you in a tough spot here. And
Well, I think the easy fix for them would be to just give that parcel to the town rather than making an easement.
yep, that could be part of it, and then depending on, I mean, you'd get a better idea from that plan, but that plan doesn't show does it show the utility line easement
Yep.
there?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay,
Yep.
right here.
so we
So,
just,
it says, except for public utilities in place at the time of the passage of this provision, no more than 30% of any required frontage shall be encumbered by easements, drives, access strips, or ways of any type. So, you were required to have 100 feet of frontage, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
Office Park Industrial, 200, oh, that's the lot width. 100 feet of, 50 feet of frontage. So, the way that I would read this is that no more than 30% of required frontage. So if you have 500 feet of frontage, 350 feet of it could be easement, and then whatever 30% of 150 is what, another like 42 and a half feet?
Yeah.
So you could
Would
be
it-
upwards of 390 feet of easement, and the remainder of it would have to be quote-unquote free and clear.
Wouldn't it be more that if you have 100 feet of frontage, that not more than 30% of that could be encumbered? So what you would need is at least 70 feet clear frontage?
Yes, but you need 150 feet of frontage.
Oh, okay, I thought it was 100, okay.
So it just, 70%
principle,
of that 150 needs to not have the easement.
Yep. Which is 45 feet. So you're required to have 150 feet, and you have to have 105 feet clear. The remainder can be encumbered. That's not an issue.
Didn't it
Yeah,
include access
at-
drives? So their driveways would count.
No, driveways are on easements.
Didn't you say access drives?
And easements, drives, access strips, or ways of any type.
Right.
So
So an
easement
access
So
strip
the
would be
driveway-
more like
But
a...
they still,
We
they
can't-
still only need 105 feet of clear
True.
frontage out of the 500
And I-
or so they
Right,
have.
but they don't have it, if you
Yeah.
look at this plan.
Well, I think if you go back to the site plan, Adam,
Yeah,
make that
but this is the driveway. You can't have the driveway there, the way I'm reading it.
Right,
But the,
but it stops there.
we don't need the easement for our own driveway.
No, but it,
So the
but the way
westerly-
I'm hearing what Adam is saying is that it can't be encumbered by a way, and that would be a way, correct?
no, it's not a way, it's a drive,
A
which it also,
drive,
which it
so-
also includes in that description.
Right, so that 105 feet that's required can't have the driveway on it, which right now it does.
I
But,
think I think that's supposed to be for like a common driveway.
well, but we would need an interpretation from the building commissioner on what his take on that is.
I think on the westerly side of the site, we can reduce, or eliminate, I should say, a portion of that easement along the frontage, because what we did was we just went from the port and tangency on the curve and just made it the whole frontage all the way to the westerly property line.
But this
So
is
if
where
we stop
you,
that short,
yes, on the westerly side, so you're saying over here, you can find 105 feet that doesn't include.
yeah, we
this-
don't need it, we don't really need it right there because he's not gonna be plowing our driveway. So I think we can grab 150 feet or 100 feet or 105 or whatever, 100, we'll pick a number that works and pull that easement back to provide the minimum of 105 feet of unencumbered by easement frontage. I think that's the intention.
Well, it also mentions drives, so
But it-
you need
yeah.
105 feet from, if you're gonna use westerly, from this property line to out here, that is 105 exclusive of this 35 for the driveway.
I'm not sure if I agree with that,
Well,
only because of the fact that if you only had 100 feet of frontage and you put a driveway in it, or 150 feet of frontage, you have to put the driveway somewhere, even if you had no easement.
So you could put a 45-foot
Yeah,
wide
it's
driveway.
45, I mean, you still have 45 feet.
Yep.
The other option,
Okay.
as Mr. Allison mentioned, is to, rather than the 10-foot wide right-of-way easement, is to turn that strip of land over to the town, and then you wouldn't have to deal with the frontage issue.
I'm dating myself here, but I believe I was around when this regulation was created, and I believe the intention was for common driveways. And that, unfortunately, we can't bring Marion back and confirm that. But that was, I believe that was the intention, to not allow too much of the frontage to be used for common driveways, to create frontage with driveways going all over the place to different lots. Clearly, this driveway is for this lot. I don't think that that's applicable to this particular use relative to that sentence.
That may be, but it reads as it reads, and the building commissioner would be the one who would make the final determination, so
And
we would need to get his interpretation. If he reads it the way you do, Bill, then such is life, but I don't know what his interpretation is.
Right.
my,
So for the purpose of the A&R plan, I think that, I'm just putting it out there, I believe that we can get the A&R plan endorsed. I think that that's, because there's no easement shown in that plan right now. And I think as part of the site plan review process, we need to clean up this issue with the building department.
I would
Is that
agree
fair?
with that.
I mean, from my perspective, the easement that's being granted to the town isn't reflected on this A&R. The only easement that's reflected on the A&R is the proposed utility line easement to protect Keating's rights to have their utility poles there. But we're faced with a little bit of a situation because we're all well aware of the easement, and we're potentially endorsing an A&R that will later be in violation of the bylaw, and whether you agree with the driveway being part of it or not. I think from my perspective, the simple solution is to reflect the 10-foot currently right-of-way easement on this A&R and show it as a parcel to be turned over to the town, and then you can use whatever frontage you want for whatever you want to do, because you don't have that easement to work around. But
So why don't we do this, and I think that this works for everybody, why don't we grant you an extension of time to endorse the A&R plan, to give Adam and myself time to discuss this with the building inspector and come up with the right answer. So that way, I agree with you 100%, that way when we come back to it, the answer is clear in everyone's mind, and the board can approve both the site plan and the A&R plan in a way that we're all consistent. Because at the end of the day, we eventually have to pull a building permit on this, and if the frontage is an issue because of the way we're showing an easement, we need to know that now.
And, you know, I agree with you in some respects, Bill. I think also the board, that easement doesn't exist on the site plan. It's proposed. If the board were to approve the A&R tonight, it's legal because the easement, neither of the easements, the one on the A&R nor the one in the site plan, exist. And if you can find the space that you need, or the building commissioner agrees with you, there's no need to do anything further. If the building commissioner agrees with the board and my general interpretation, and you decide you want to give that slice of property to the town, the board could theoretically waive the fee on an additional A&R for that. I don't know which is cleaner, I don't know which is easier, I don't know which gets you where you're trying to be.
Yeah, I agree with the chair. I think
That's fine.
let's get that piece figured out. And that way, what we can do is we can add that easement to the A&R plan, so when you guys endorse the A&R plan, the easement is considered, and we can then update the site plan if needed prior to construction.
Okay. Would you email me something to that respect that we can record, please?
Yes. When's the next meeting that you have?
The 27th of September.
Okay, so that should give us enough time to sit with the building inspector or go over this.
Yeah, we should have plenty of time to do that.
So I'll grant an extension of endorsement to the A&R plan to September 30th, just to keep it clean. Does that work for you, Jack and Peter?
Yes.
Excellent. So why don't we move forward to site plan approval?
Do we need a motion on that to
No,
extend it, or no? Okay,
No, because you're.
because you're the only one who can grant that.
right, okay.
Do you still want this open?
I think that's our next thing, right?
Okay,
I think I'm gonna lay it down behind you now.
So if you want to go ahead and bring us up to speed on the site plan approval stuff?
So we were before the board a few weeks ago. At that time, we had just received comments back from Graves Engineering and had a couple outstanding comments raised by the DPW director, Rob Oliver. Since that time, we've had several meetings and several review working sessions with DPW and Graves Engineering and have modified the plans according to Graves' comment letter, as well as some of the requests from DPW. Specifically, most of the work that was modified on the site is relative to the front portion of the property, specifically the entranceways into the site. We have modified those a little bit more in order to allow for greater truck access and accessibility relative to that perspective, and correspondingly adjusted the drainage system, primarily the large infiltration basin in the front of the property, to accommodate these changes. In addition, during these conversations, it was a concern raised relative to the widening of the road. Currently, there is an old drop inlet on the northerly side of Leominster Shirley Road, which, for essentially, lack of a better term, is non-functional. It's flooded and doesn't do well. So it's the intent, as part of the overall widening, in order to allow for an additional turning lane into the property for traffic management perspective, to incorporate a head wall system as an extension of that pipe that's already currently underneath Leominster Shirley Road in order to maintain drainage through this area. Some of the other modifications were relative to drainage and general engineering practice, modification of some notational errors on the plan, but besides that, the main portion of the work that was modified was along the frontage of the site. In addition to this, we are proposing to provide additional signage along Leominster Shirley Road, as it was concern raised by both the board and the Board of Selectmen. So we are providing additional signage for that as well. In addition, since the previous meeting, we have met with Conservation, and they have granted us an order of conditions for the proposed work within the buffer zones. And that's generally it. If there's any questions from the board, I can be more happy to address them.
So at our last meeting, one of the primary concerns was traffic. And from my perspective, a lot of the issues revolved around the intersection of Reservoir Road and Leominster Shirley Road, which is just west of your site. I know that area well. I travel it frequently. And Mr. Burney actually brought it to my attention that a couple of years ago, Keating, the quarry operation, started improving the sight lines at that intersection. They cleared a bunch of vegetation along the road. And that's about as far as they got. But with a little bit of earthwork on that corner, I think it would be possible to greatly improve the sight lines coming up to that intersection. I don't know exactly, what's involved in terms of working with Keatings, but clearly you guys have a relationship with them. And that might be something worth exploring. That intersection's been an issue for a very long time. It's not necessarily your issue to resolve, but at the same time, looking at hundreds of trips per day being added to that intersection is of concern. And so that's something I wanted to bring forward as potentially a cost-effective solution that doesn't involve repaving things and lights and grading and so on. It's simply clear the shoulder of the road so that the people that are headed eastbound on Leominster Shirley Road can see the traffic that's coming over the hill, because there's just a lot of traffic in that area, and it's steadily grown as more and more homes have been built in the area. Devon's has been redeveloped, and the access to Devon's through Shirley and Hospital Road, and the quarry traffic and the asphalt plant. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on there. And so that's something I'd ask that the applicant entertain, at least exploring, and perhaps a DPW director can aid you in that process, because I'm sure he's well aware of that intersection.
You're talking about this area, Mr. Cole, on the screen in the back, where these trees are, the cursor's kind of moving
Yeah.
across.
Yeah,
Across the street from the intersection.
Yeah. Essentially, as you come to the end of Reservoir Road, it's all that land right in front of you. I want to say it was about 2 years ago, they cleared all the trees back along the shoulder of the road there, but never did any of the earthwork. So just something that hopefully could at least be explored at this point. So, any other questions or comments, concerns from the board? Do we have anybody from the public here?
I was actually going to suggest that perhaps Mr. Anderson wanted to go over the traffic mitigation measures or enhancements that they were proposing. I think it was discussed nominally at the select board meeting, and I just saw the plan today, and I know that you folks have it in your packet for tonight, so it might just be a good introduction to some of what was proposed and discussed by the applicant.
Absolutely. I'll defer to Eric Reese. He's the traffic engineer on the project, as he's a little bit more well-versed in this than I, so.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Eric Reese. I work for GPI. We're the traffic consultant on this project. So, thank you. So this was a signage plan we put together just to kind of help with the Reservoir Road corner. Out there today, they just have some slow intersection ahead signs that we find kind of ambiguous, and their reflectivity isn't up to today's standards. So we were just proposing to have, a sign that is a picture showing a curve of a road with the road sticking out on the side, and then Reservoir Road to make it more clear that you're going around a curve, there's a road on your side, and it's Reservoir Road. And then we would reuse the same posts that the slow intersection ahead signs are using, so they would just essentially just swap them out. And then we also were going to add a trucks entering sign about 250 feet from our site, so that vehicles coming know that trucks are entering a site driveway and also would be entering the roadway.
Could you go over the traffic study information in a little more detail in terms of how many trips per day, truck trips, passenger vehicle trips, and
Yeah, of course.
give a little bit of an explanation of what a trip is and
Yep.
so on, because I know that there are some abutters and people that live in that area that are concerned about the truck volume that's going to and from the site, and like hours of operation, noise, things like that, and that all revolves around the traffic information.
Yes. So one of the tables we provided in our report to talk about total trips, this is for a 24-hour period, just for reference, is that we would have 634 total trips in a 24-hour period. Now, that is for both employees working at the warehouse and for truck traffic, and that means 317 trips entering the site and 317 trips exiting the site. Of those, of the total 634 trips, you'd have 208, so 104 trucks would encompass those trips. And then 426 total trips, meaning 213 employees who actually would work at the warehouse, would be the remainder of the trips. As far as peak hours, we had here that your total trips in the AM peak hour would be 70. So we have 54 trips entering the site and 16 exiting. Of those, only 7 of the total trips would be trucks, because it's still, your peak hour along Leominster Shirley Road is around 7:30 to 8:30 in the morning. And then 63 total trips would be employees to work at the site. And then for the PM peak hour, you're looking at a total of about 72 trips, 19 entering, 53 exiting. Of those 72, 11 total would be trucks, and 61 would be employees working at the warehouse. And again, that is, those last two were just the AM and PM peak hour, and the first numbers were for the entire day. So as you can see, as far as peak hours, the amount of vehicles isn't as high as you talk about. 634 is not being added during rush hour. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
What are the proposed hours of operation?
Good evening. For the record, Peter Mahoney with John M. Corcoran and Company. As of today, we don't, as we've mentioned, I think at our last hearing, we don't have a user identified for the building, so we can't specifically say that the hours are going to be X or Y or anything at this point. So wish I could have a more clear answer, but that's where we stand today.
Okay, so that begs the question, if you don't have a user identified, what basis are you using to do your traffic study on?
Didn't want to get that one. So we use the Institute for Transportation Engineers, ITE. They have a trip generation manual. We use the 10th edition. We based it on the square footage of the building. So the proposed building is 372,000 square feet. So we put that into the trip gen manual, and using the formulas that they have, which are based on similar types of land use, like for us it's a warehouse. They use that to determine, based on other projects throughout the country, roughly how many trucks would it be utilizing, how many employees would it be utilizing throughout the day.
Okay.
So I would think in almost 8 acres of building, you'd have at least some office space. And office space, I would think, would give you a bigger number. Did you use all 300 and something thousand square feet as warehouse?
I mean, we called the entire thing we used it as a warehouse.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I mean, you're assuming essentially 213 employees who are there at the warehouse, not just truck drivers. I'm not exactly sure if it accounts that some of those are office employees, not necessarily working on the floor. I'm not sure exactly how it breaks that down.
The
Mr.
use
Chair,
of
Bill Hannigan from Hannigan Engineering. There's a couple things on Eric's stuff that I would like to comment on. First off, I think we need to be clear, or more clear, Eric, I think you can provide some information on this, that the truck drivers that are coming in and out of the south, they are also part of the employee count. So the 216 trips in and out that he's referring to as far as warehouse personnel are exclusive of the truck personnel that we have in the employee counts that are going around. I was unaware that in my presentation a month or so ago that the truck drivers were employees as well, and those are all incorporated. That was the first thing. The second part of it is that typically in my discussions with Heather Monica on past projects is that there's always an office component within warehouse space. So that office component to run the business is presumed to be within the warehouse space at the same time.
Okay.
I mean, if it was
Bertram?
dedicated, if they take a space and lease it to someone who does nothing but office, if they lease it to an engineering company, then that's not appropriate for what we're talking about. But the intent is that if there's a company that goes in there and does distribution and warehousing, that they're going to have office personnel there running the business of their operations. It may be, if they have multiple sites throughout the region or throughout the country, it may be a smaller office staff than if it was the headquarters. But that's really figured within those ITE numbers.
Okay. Mrs. Bertram, you had a,
Well, actually, Mr. Hannigan answered it, I think. So what you're saying, Bill, is that the number of employees that we're talking about includes the truck driver personnel, correct?
That is correct. So just waiting for me.
One of the big questions that I have is the truck traffic in the evening and the associated sound. We did have an abutter express concern with truck traffic backing up, and typically you hear the beeping of a truck backing up, and apparently this abutter can hear the Keating trucks at night. And now if we compound that, and without having an idea of what the use is and what the hours are going to be, that concerns me.
If I could comment on that. So we did hear that concern from one of the nearby residents. What I'd point out is that the beeping on the Keating trucks are large construction vehicles with noises loud enough to make themselves heard on a busy construction site. Different, the beeping you would hear from a tractor trailer backing up is at a much lower decibel than what you would hear from a Keating site. The only thing I would other point out would that we have this large berm at the back of the site, 25 feet tall, which is different, again, different from the Keating site, which is a little more open, so. Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Can you just point that berm out?
Yeah, this, the total line here run up significantly all the way back to the site adjacent to the railroad.
Okay.
So that will, noise stops with a barrier. So that would help also mitigate to the extent they were actually to be audible.
Okay, thank you.
You do have two people on Zoom with hands up when the board is done with their.
any other comments from the board before we hear from the public? Mary Perkins, if you'd like to go ahead and unmute yourself, you can comment.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I live very close to this site, and I live on Lake Shirley.
Could you state your address for the record, Mrs. Perkins?
Okay, Mary Perkins, 62 Ruth Street, Lunenburg. I have a couple of thoughts. Big tractor trailers going in, but if it's a distribution center, I would think there could be delivery vans coming out. Why would there be huge tractor trailers going in and then those big tractor trailers taking the same inventory back out? And I'm very concerned about the beeping noise, and I would like to see a noise barrier put up. Yes, there's a brim there, but in looking at the site plans, how close it is to the railroad bridge, and I live at the railroad bridge. And so I am extremely concerned with the noise, and backup vans are going to have those same backup beeping noises. I talked to a neighbor who's actually a truck driver, and I've heard people say that the tractor trailers don't make that beeping noise, and he's told me that is completely untrue. He hears Keatings all night long, and he said if I'm hearing Keatings, you're going to be hearing these trucks too. I'm also concerned about environmentally. There could be blanding turtles, which is on the endangered species I live off off of Round Road. You can go up Round Road, and I have seen blanding turtles in that area, crossing Round Road. And I think we need to be careful from an environmental perspective and being so close to Lake Shirley and all the beautiful nature that we have in our area. But my main concern is noise. I would like to see a big highway cement barrier put up if we're going to be going forward with this.
Thank you. And we
Thank
have-
you.
Yep. The name is Widget.
Okay,
hi.
Widget, you can go ahead and make your comment.
Please state your name and residential address.
Yep. My name is Laura Bowsam, and I live on Robs Hill Road. And when Keating works overnight, when they're doing nighttime paving, I can hear them from my house. It's not just the trucks, it's just the general machinery too, and traffic. But I do hear the beeping. So the noise concerns me. And I'm not that close. I'm way on the other side of the lake. I also have concerns about the traffic. If the Reservoir Road intersection is not fixed somehow, that the traffic back up there could cause people to start cutting through Robs Hill to get to Route 2 instead of, trying to turn left onto Leominster Shirley from Reservoir or waiting for trucks to go by. They'll just come down Robs Hill to get to Route 2, which they already do. But I think the traffic will increase on our road. So, I share a lot of the same concerns as Mary and a lot of the same concerns that the select board spoke about. Was it last week? I think, yeah. I don't know that just putting signs up at these intersections is really going to help the traffic that's going to be coming with this warehouse. So those are my concerns. But thank you for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for submitting your email comment as well. She submitted a comment.
Go ahead.
I do have a comment. My name's Steve Bean. I live at 27 Fire Road 15. My property is probably the closest property that abuts this entire project. When I moved here, fully aware of Keating, and I accepted that completely. This is going to add a tremendous amount of noise for sure. The traffic, as you said, going from Leominster Shirley to Reservoir Road, that is a complete and total gauntlet. When you commit to take a left, you commit and you go, because when that corner, you can't see any cars coming, and if they are going faster than the speed limit, I can't tell you how many times I've turned and had to just floor it because you're going to get into an accident. And if you have an 18-wheeler, a truck, a van going fast, I don't care what the speed limit is, people don't drive the speed limit. That is a complete and total blind spot there. But the noise is a huge concern for me. My property abuts the train tracks. I hear Keating all night long. I've driven trucks. I worked for Keating. I know the sounds of triaxles backing up, and the beeping noise is a huge concern. And everything I'm hearing here, it's all hypotheticals. We don't have anybody working there, so we don't know what time. That pretty much tells me it's a 24-hour warehouse. It's hypotheticals on employees. We really don't have any idea how many trucks are coming in and out because we don't know the company coming there. Is it Amazon? Way more than 600 vehicles going to go in and out of there. You don't have any idea. So the sound is huge. The traffic is huge for me. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments from the board? Anybody? Oh, Mr. Rogers.
Mr. Chairman, member of the board. I'm Dave Rogers. I live at 82 Highland Street. And although I'm supportive of increasing the tax base, I think we have to be very, very cautious about the details of such a project. I too have concerns about the specificity of how many people will work there, what the hours will be, and specifically, I have a question: is this considered a high bay distribution warehouse? Because that is completely different than a regular warehouse. So I'd like that question answered. But people don't know, so it's really difficult to plan for something that you don't know. There's been bandied about the last time with the board of the select board. There were 300 employees. Nobody said anything about truck drivers being part of those employees, but I think it's very important to understand the number of people that will be there on a continuing basis. And specifically, my question would be, how many parking spaces have been allocated for, quote, employees other than truck drivers? The further concerns that I have, if you're coming from the west down towards Shirley, that hill can be very, very difficult at times, and especially with 18-wheelers or whatever kind of trucks will be coming down. And it's not clear in my mind when they come down to the base of the area, it's a left-hand turn, correct, into the site? Now, I don't know how the building is positioned. Is it back? Is it along the periphery? And how do the trucks come in and out? And how many? I'm not going to use the right term, but how many openings or places that the trucks can back up are anticipated? Because that would indicate the number of potential tractor trailers and that would be in there. The 104 number of trips has been bandied about, and I understand that. But the other thing that I think we have to take into consideration here is the space across the road at the base. There's some 300 acres in there. So, and that's for sale or for development as well. So what we do here could impact what is done there. And it could be really amplified extensively. So it's critical that we understand what we're getting ourselves in for and how we will welcome a business or an entity and make sure that it's a win-win situation for the town and for the best business entity that's there. I understand how the real estate game is played. I truly do. I was the real estate manager for a section of Data General Corporation many years ago. I don't know how to diplomatically ask this, but I'm just going to ask it out front. Is it the intent of the developer to build and hold, or is this have the potential of flipping this complex? And I'd like an answer to that if I could. And clearly, it's absolutely in their purview to do whatever they want to do. But the reason I'm asking that question is, the devil known is better than the devil unknown. and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, but rather, we know the engineering firm that's doing this. Fine people, fine company, et cetera, et cetera. We know the Corcoran people, at least I do, and their reputation is pristine, okay? We don't know if the next folks that come in are going to be as easy to deal with and to have that same kind of thing, because it might just be a REIT, and they just interested in return. So the point is, we've got to build in some safeguards here, I think, that will allow us to protect the environment, protect the sound, protect the neighbors, and also the traffic, and because this could be a real Donnybrook if we don't do this right. And I'm not smart enough to know how you do that, but I think we have to do that. So if I could have a response to those questions, I'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think the potential always exists for turnaround on anything like this. Just personally, my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, you can only design and review and approve what's presented, and who knows what the future holds with some of this. But I would like to invite the engineer up to answer a few of those questions in terms of how many loading docks you plan on having, if this is, in fact, a high bay warehouse, as Mr. Rogers asked. And if you could also go over the traffic details, because I know the plan shows adding a turn lane there, which I know he was concerned about coming down the hill and being able to access the site, so.
Absolutely. All right, so I guess to start off, let's start off at the point of beginning. At this point, it would be Leominster Shirley Road. So currently, there are 2 lanes opposing traffic going east and west along Leominster Shirley Road. It's the intent to add in a second 11-foot wide turning lane that would be dedicated purely as an entry point into the property. So there's only going to be 2 driveway openings. The entry point will be along the easterly side of the property, and there will be an exit point along the westerly side of the property. The road lane system, if you will, has been designed such that the eastbound lane has essentially a straight shot, so there's no swerving to get around something or anything like that, such as a truck trying to turn left. So the truck would actually have to bear left into the turn lane in order to take the left-hand turn into the site itself. So it allows for a straight-through, continuing lane going eastbound. From there, the truck traffic will turn into the site, separated by 2 lanes of traffic, one dedicated to the truck traffic itself.
If you look behind you.
So as you see on the screen behind me, there is an access drive that runs along the easterly side of the property, and a second lane that's abutting the building itself that's dedicated just to employee parking. The truck traffic lane will extend around the entire perimeter of the building. So the building is set back quite a bit ways from the actual road system itself, or from Leominster Shirley Road, to allow for additional parking along the front of the building itself. This driveway, if you hold on one moment. This is the entrance, just a color version of that. This is the middle point, if you will, of the actual site itself. As you can see through here, here's the access drive that continues in a northerly direction.
Can you point, sir, so we can have some reference, because I don't know what you're talking about here.
Are you able to go to the next page?
Yeah, I can't keep up with you because your plans take forever to load. So as I scroll, it lags.
Why don't you turn the plan so that?
Because it's on camera for people at home to see.
Oh, okay.
Want to sit over here?
Why don't you come sit with us, Dave?
Why don't you go?
It's also on
You
the.
guys want to come up this way.
Okay, so orient me, where's Shirley?
It's on the bottom of the plan.
The bottom of the plan.
So this sheet here, sorry, there's a light, so I'm trying to.
And, sir, if you could grab the microphone and just. Thank you.
All right, does this work? All right, so as you can see here, we have Leominster Shirley Road along the bottom of the page.
Okay, yeah, good.
All right. This will be the truck turning lane improvements that I just previously mentioned. As you can see, eastbound lane, right here, there will be a dedicated left-hand turn lane that enters into the property, into the main driveway entrance.
Okay.
Okay. So this was the sheet I just went over. This next one, as you can see here, running along this portion of the site is the truck access lane that continues in a northerly direction. You have additional parking with the actual truck storage bays being located along the westerly side abutting the Keating property or the Keating facility.
Okay. And how many doors are there, sir?
Off the top of my head, I do not remember. Approximately 71. 71.
71.
Yes. So as you come across the northern portion of the site, just to orientate ourselves here, we have the Lafarge Railroad spur along the easterly side of the property, and you have the MBTA lane, our train system, running along the northerly portion of the site.
You're right in the way. You're blocking everything. I can't see.
Sorry.
If you stand on the other side of the easel, the camera will get you. Yeah.
No
there
problem.
you go.
I apologize. All right. Okay. So we have the MBTA along the northerly portion of the site.
Okay.
You have the Lafarge concrete plant located to the east of the site. So as I stated earlier, the truck access lane dedicated continues in a northerly direction, loops around the back of the site. There you go. And then into the loading area dedicated on the westerly side of the building.
So what is all of that on that northerly side? I guess
That would be a approximately 25 to 30 foot cut into the hill. So the site itself is set deep into the slope. So there's actually, we're creating a natural berm in addition to the railroad spur itself.
so, but going around, there's no entrances on that northerly side of the building? And then do they start right on the westerly side, right on the corner there?
Correct.
So what is the distance from there to the railroad track? Because what you're cutting out right there where the Lafarge spur is, literally right on the other side of that train track, 25 feet from that train track is my property. And my house is an extra 100 feet away from it. So my front door is 150 feet from that train track. So as those trucks are backing into that corner of that building, you're gonna be roughly 200-300 feet, a football field away from my property. And I don't care the decibel on a semi-tractor trailer versus a D10. I'm gonna hear that. And I'm gonna hear that all night long if that's running 24 hours. And, you know, that is a huge problem to me. And I understand, yes, if you've got a high berm, that it is definitely gonna deaden some of that sound. But it's not gonna deaden it all night long at 12, 1, 2, 3 in the morning when those things are running 24/7. And, you know, that is the thing that concerns me about the town allowing something like this to come in. You know, it's you've got to think of your residents, and if there's not going to be limitations on hours, that's a huge detriment to the sanity aspect of being home and in your safe place, and all you hear is trucks all night long. And that's literally right there now. So that's my issue with the noise. Everybody has a right to run a business and operate a business, but that's, you know, exactly what you said. You're setting it way back off the road, back into the hillside, so you can park a whole bunch of cars in front of the building. Cars in the back. I don't know. It's just, it doesn't seem right to me.
Thank you.
Okay. And then as we continue through, the overall traffic pattern. I'm going to glance over the middle portion, that middle slide that I showed you. It's pretty much the same. It's just loading docks. And then as you come to the exit point of the site, there will be a dedicated exit only. Right here. Sorry. A dedicated exit lane, which will allow for truck traffic to go either east or westbound. And as part of this, we're widening that curb line out, or the shoulder line, if you will, a little bit more, so a truck can have the adequate turning swing maneuver in order to get out onto the road without crossing into opposite lanes of traffic. And that's essentially the general traffic pattern.
Yes. Where is the parking space for the employees?
The truck or the employee parking spaces are dedicated along the front portion, of the building, as well as along the easterly side of the building, along the entire length, and also with some additional spaces along the northern portion of the site, or building face, if you will, in case there's a double tenant of some sort.
And how many spaces have you provided for?
We are providing 405 spaces.
And that's for?
Employees and visitors of the sort.
Could you locate for us visually the wetland area that's down in that quadrant?
There is a wetland series located along the rail spur from the Lafarge property. There is an isolated wetland there. Relative to environmental permitting, I know it's not the purview of the board, but as part of this, we are satisfying the requirements of this local wetland ordinance, or bylaw, if you will, by maintaining at minimum a 50-foot buffer around that entire wetland. So.
What about the septic system for all the employees?
So we have done extensive testing relative to the septic system itself. The septic system will be located within a band of naturally occurring sand that runs along the frontage of the property, and will be along the southerly face of the proposed building. And that is still subject to Board of Health review and design.
How big is that area?
If I remember correctly, it's approximately 80 by 200.
1,600 square.
Approximately. And that would accommodate the entire anticipated flow from the site.
I have one more question that I've received. Thank you. This has been very helpful.
No problem.
I have a question. There was a large, what looked like a paved area on the northeast corner.
You're talking about this site right here?
Yeah.
Yes, that would be utilized as temporary storage of trailers.
Okay. That's where I was assuming your septic would be.
Ironically, that is where the coarser, or not as favorable soils exist on the site.
Trailers will be all backed in,
They'd be backed in there and stored temporarily.
so backing up with more backup meters right along that perimeter.
Mrs. Perkins, if you would like to make your comment.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
I guess in listening to Steve speak, just thinking about, we're all for new tax revenue, but we also have to think about the impact to the houses and the revenue from the real estate taxes of what we pay. And the houses that are all being sold, about the last 4 houses on Lake Shirley, have sold well above $1 million. There is one that just sold on Palmer. While we don't know the final final price that it sold at, we know it was above asking at 1.3. And those houses, and another one, it was above asking on Round Road at 800. They both have for sale signs still up in front of their houses. And so as you walk the neighborhood, you hear the Keatings, and we all know that, and we all grew up with it and understand it. But as you think about the impact of what this facility is going to do to the homes around Lake Shirley, you need to understand and also take into consideration the impact on the real estate taxes, as these houses are no longer going to be valued at $1 million, because who wants to live next to all that noise all day long? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a few questions, if I may.
Certainly.
I'm trying to just kind of mentally crunch a couple numbers here, and I didn't get a chance to write down all of the original traffic numbers, so I apologize that I'm working from memory. But I think I've heard that there's 280-ish employees is the assumption, including truck drivers. And there'll be a follow-up based on trying to understand these numbers. I'm trying to piece together what this looks like in practice.
Yeah, not a problem. So if you included it, based on the IT trip gen, if you had included the truck drivers and employees that would just be working in the warehouse, you're looking at 317 employees.
Oh, okay.
That's a new number.
Let me just write that down quickly. Okay, that makes more. I was trying to figure out, I had a different number down, why there would be 400 spaces for 200 some odd employees, but I had the wrong number. That makes a lot more sense. Thank you. I appreciate that. A question that might be more for Mr. Bernie or for the board. So this is an industrial zoned area, correct? That's my understanding.
That's correct.
How long has this area been zoned industrial?
Longer than I've worked here.
Okay. So this wasn't a recent change in our zoning?
No, I believe it's probably been zoned industrial since the 90s.
Okay.
I think is when all the zones really got formalized in the way that they are now, if memory serves.
I thought it was 1986.
And maybe it
number that
was. I thought there was an
comes to mind.
update in the early 90s.
Yeah.
All right. I'm trying to wrap my mind around the idea of noise from this versus noise from other industrial uses that could come along, and if there is a big difference. And I don't think anyone necessarily has a tidy answer for that, but that's what I'm hearing concerns that I get. But I'm also aware the area has been zoned industrial for 30-ish years. And, all right. I think those are my big questions. Thank you.
If I may. I got more traffic questions. So there's 405 spaces. Do I remember you correctly, 600 and something trips per day?
Total trips was 634, so that's people entering and exiting.
Okay, so and that's on the largest shift, or is that 24
That's just
hours?
that's throughout the entire day.
So if you've got, if it's only open for 8 hours versus if it's 24 hours with 3 shifts, then there's a potential for tripling that?
The idea is based on the square footage, so the number of shifts to be determined would theoretically not affect.
Well, I don't think that total space and actual numbers of employees coming and going are. I'm having a real difficult time accepting just general pulled out of the box numbers for an undeclared use, unspecified numbers of businesses potentially, and we don't know the hours of operation. I mean, it seems that it would be foolish to go to all the expense of building an 8-acre building and not using it 24 hours a day. I mean, it makes sense to me that there would be at least 3 shifts. So, and if you've got your, 400 parking spaces, satisfies the largest shift. If they're 3 of the same numbered shifts, then I'm seeing that it could potentially be 3 times as many trips. That's what I'm seeing. I don't know if I'm seeing it different than anybody else, but.
We don't know who the tenant is at this point in time, and these are based upon the numbers that, that Eric and his group have used based upon warehouse uses, kind of across the country.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I share the concerns Mr. Allison just outlined, and I'm very sensitive to the potential noise impacts of this type of development to a residential area. So while I appreciate the earthen berm, quite frankly, I don't think it's enough. I would want a much more substantial sound barrier, and I would want the data on the decibel level that it can handle. And I'm very concerned not understanding who the tenant is going to be, because in looking at the response to the DPW's concern relative to the number of traffic trips, and I'm reading Hannigan Engineering's response, it talks about the facility will generate additional daily vehicle trips. This doesn't translate directly to truck trips. Of the 634 daily vehicle trips, 208 of these are anticipated to be truck-related. We don't know that. Without understanding what the use is, and as Mr. Allison outlined, what the shifts are going to be, I don't know. We would have to put limits on exactly what the hours of operation would be, and that would be very difficult to do because we don't know what the potential use is going to be. So I have a number of concerns about this proposal. I'm also very concerned that if I look at the architectural rendering, it's simply warehouse, but yet I heard that it always includes office. Well, I want to know how much office. Without a tenant identified, I think that the use of this building could change significantly, which would change what we're approving. So I would like to understand better exactly what's going to go on in the building. And if a percentage of that building is office space, I would like to know what that is. Because there are different numbers associated with that. And I think understanding the shifts is extremely important because that's going to translate to traffic. So to me, there's a lot of unknowns that I'm not comfortable with.
As far as the office space, as we said earlier, it is factored into the equation, and also ITE, how they come up with the numbers, is based on warehouses throughout the country and how they're utilized based on our square footage.
But warehouses throughout the country, it depends on the type of distribution center. As Mr. Allison pointed out, if you've got, if it's open in an 8-hour day, then that's very different than a 24-hour distribution center. So I need to understand the hours of operation that you're proposing.
And the land use code we used is based on the essentially worst case peak hour effects. We ran through multiple land use codes of different types of warehousing, and the generic warehousing one produced the most peak hour trips because we figured that would have the most impact to traffic. And we wanted to make sure we were upfront with that.
Okay. So clearly, there are a lot of concerns around traffic. And I think at this point, I would be more comfortable if we had a peer review of the traffic component of this to get a better understanding from our engineer how this all shakes out, to get a third party to take a look at it. I don't know how the rest of the board feels about that. I share the concerns that people have raised in terms of, well, they don't know who the tenant is and how does that shape up in terms of how many shifts, 24 hours versus 8 or 12-hour day. But from my perspective, that's a very legitimate concern, but unfortunately it's nothing that you can really prepare for in the long term. You could be go back 20 years, you could be in front of us proposing a Blockbuster Video warehouse. It wouldn't be Blockbuster today. And so the tenant, the use is dynamic. And regardless of what this board approves through the site plan approval process, that doesn't mean that use is etched in stone. But at the same time, we need to be well aware of what the potential impacts are to that area, and kind of take a look at the worst case scenario and make sure that we respect the abutters and the traffic and the noise that is associated with these type of distribution facilities. My other comment is that I have a lot of respect for people's concerns in regards to the use of their residential property. There are a lot of residences around Lake Shirley that adjoin this parcel. But that's also tempered with the fact that this is industrial land. This is an approved use, according to our zoning bylaw. And so the applicant and the property owner has the right to develop that use. This isn't a special permit process or anything like that. This is by right. And so to the extent we can through this site plan approval process, it's our job to try to address those concerns the best we can. But at the end of the day, this is an industrial property, and this is an industrial use, and so those are my two comments. Mr. Rogers,
Yes.
one more comment.
I'll be brief.
You gotta come
Thank
up to
you.
the mic.
Any other public?
The tractor trailers that will be coming out, where do the traffic people think they will be turning? Are they going to be turning left to go to Shirley and access Route 2 that way? Or are they going to be turning right and going up the hill? That's point number one. Point number two, is this considered to be a high bay distribution facility? And along those lines, what's the load capacity on the floors? And is it anticipated that these could go up as high as 40 feet? Because that changes the whole dimension of this thing. And the last was I really would like to have an indication from the developers what their philosophical perspective is. Is this a build and hold, or is this a flipping kind of a situation? Because it makes a big difference to me. Thank you.
I can at least answer the truck question, and we anticipated all truck traffic to be coming to and from Route 2 in Lunenburg. So we assume that all of the trucks will be exiting the site, traveling westbound, and then traveling along Fort Pond Road to then get onto Route 2, or conversely to come back to the site to get off of Route 2. And then 50% of that truck traffic would be coming from the east and 50% would be coming from the west along Route 2.
Did you want to speak to Mr. Rogers' other two questions in terms of what the overall ceiling height that's being proposed?
Ceiling height would be 36 feet clear. I believe that's the number. It's all, it's considered a high bay use. That's the use of the warehouse. That's kind of not a formal term, but that's the market term.
And what about your philosophy in terms, and The question's been asked. It's up to you.
It's been
whether or
asked, yeah,
not
no,
you wanna
I honestly can't answer. Our company's philosophy, we've been around for 70 years. That's how we approach our developments. I can't answer that as we sit here today.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to comment that while I absolutely understand the points that you made, that this is an industrial use and that it is a by right use, I also think that we need to do our utmost to protect the abutters, and I think understanding the potential hours of operation, which, and this is a question, Adam, is that within our purview under a site plan review? Or is it only a special permit that we can look at hours of operation? But while Adam's looking that up, I'm very concerned about the noise, and as I said, I would want to see an exterior structure designed to protect the abutters from noise pollution in addition to the potential burn or in place of. And I also had some questions regarding lighting on this parcel. What do you see as lighting? How much of this facility is going to be lit? What is your lighting plan?
Photometric.
I unfortunately do not have the photometric plan with me, but it is part of the submittal package on the plan set. Essentially, there will be standalone lights located throughout the parking lot area for employee parking, with some additional, more largely spaced out lighting along the perimeter of the westerly loading bay area for security purposes. And then your typical standard wall pack lighting for security purposes immediately on the building itself. But we have done that review, and it is provided as part of the submittal package.
Thank you.
I have a curiosity question. So the trucks that are entering are separated from the parking areas on the entrance and all the way through the back, but then they join back together on the westerly side where there's going to be tractor trailers backing up. So I mean, it's not a public concern, but it's a facilities kind of question.
Sorry. I can briefly go over that a little bit further. So it's the intent that as part of the operation of the actual facility itself, all employee traffic is going to be directed back through the parking areas dedicated to purely employees, so that employees are not technically going through the loading area.
Okay.
So it's more of an operation standpoint.
So even the people parking in the northerly portion still have to come all the way back around? Backtrack, basically?
Correct.
There's a connection there, though.
There is a connection for fire purposes. So if a fire truck does need to get in and around that area, they can without having to go all the way around the building.
Okay.
But from a purely operation standpoint, the intent is all employee or essentially pedestrian traffic looping itself back southerly around the building and exiting on the westerly side.
Thank you.
Did you have a question? Did you have an answer on the hours of operation, Adam?
There's nothing in the bylaw. I'm looking at the rules and regs.
Ms. Perkins, if you'd like to go ahead. Can you unmute her?
Thank you. I was just, thank you, Paula, on the lighting. That was a great question. So I just started thinking, will I not be able to see the stars at night anymore from my porch if the whole skylight is all lit up around the railroad tracks? Thank you.
We are dark skies compliant.
Yeah, we do require dark sky compliant lighting. So it's all 90-degree cutoff down facing. Our experience recently and what I've seen in other communities is most of you folks are using LED lights, so we're looking at 16 to 18-foot poles as opposed to the 25 or 30 that we were seeing before. They don't have quite the same spread as the metal halide, and they definitely don't bleed horizontally as much.
Thank you.
And Mr. Burney pretty much just stated what I was going to say, that the lighting is very concentrated to the actual developed portion of the site. It's not overspilling onto other areas of the property or the abutting properties.
I just have one last comment. Completely understand that it is zoned industrial. completely understand that it is absolutely the property's owner's right to put whatever they want there. We're just going to be neighbors. And, you know, as neighbors and as a town protecting the town's interest as well as the residents' interest, just want to make sure that this works for everybody and you're not, you know, drowning somebody out with light or noise at all hours. And just think, would you want it in your backyard? You know, at that, and that's for everybody here, for the builders as well as this board. Would you want it in your backyard? And you know, a larger barrier, noise barrier, or an hour restriction, anything like that would certainly help residents. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see anything that strictly grants you permission to restrict hours. I also don't think that there's anything that would prevent you from conditioning quiet hours or some other manner of restriction on the operation if it were safety or other related. We do have a provision under Section 6 of our bylaw that relates specifically to noise. Backup alarms or safety devices are specifically excluded from conformance with that for the obvious reasons. If they were to disable the backup alarms on the tractor trailers, I believe that becomes a federal DOT issue, not like, oh, don't do that, like probably big problems for the person with the truck. Again, I think your point about the end user is important. A lot of end users may be using the bay space overnight for moving and loading of products and not necessarily trucking products out. And that would clearly alleviate some of the issues that the residents have put in. But I think, as with anything, you can't control every single instance, especially with truck drivers. They have hours restrictions. They can only drive for so long. And when they hit that, you find them sleeping. And so they're going to get up and they're going to continue on because they're trying to power through that schedule that they have. So it's, you know, I think even if the facility were not open and a truck driver were coming to the end of his day and that's where his destination is, he's going to go there. Is he going to back up? Maybe, maybe not. So, you know, I think there's some consideration on both sides. I think, you know, obviously we've heard from the residents that the noise barrier is something they'd like to see. I am not an engineer nor a construction estimator, so I don't know what the overall cost of that is in relation to the project. I don't know the feasibility of installing it on the back, but, you know, that seems to be something that people want. Again, I don't know what the reality of that is.
Is there anything else that you would like to add? We clearly have some details to work through, especially on the
I
A&R
can say,
side.
we've been, from day one here, we've been here to work with the town. You know, we contacted Adam before we drew a line in the paper. And we've heard the concerns of the residents and our neighbors, and you know, give us some time. Let us, we'll be back to see you in a few weeks, and we'll work on these.
Excellent.
Great.
So are we looking at the end of the month or actually it would be end of this month or the end of October, because we miss our early October meeting for...
End of this month, we're back for the A&R anyway, so.
Yeah.
I do agree with the chairman's point about having a peer review on the traffic, and I just want to understand that process.
All you guys have to do is vote, and we contact Graves, and they have a sub that they would use.
Okay. So I would make a motion to require a peer review for the traffic study for the project at 1263 Reservoir Road and 435 Leominster Shirley Road.
I would second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Torgensen?
Is Graves going to be doing the same thing that I believe your name was Eric, right? All right, so are they going to be using the same standard that he just used?
So they're not going to do a traffic study. What they're going to do is GPI has submitted a full traffic study, and their sub, who is also a traffic engineer, would take that study, would go through it, would review it and say, this is sound engineering, or okay, I understand why they did it this way. Here's how I would have done it, and this is what the differences are, and that would give GPI the opportunity to respond to those comments, similar to what Mr. Walsh does with the engineering plans. He doesn't go and redesign the site. He looks at what Hannigan Engineering has submitted, and he says, oh, this invert doesn't make sense because the water's never going to run there. And, Chris might say, oh, I transposed a number. Or, so they just review it to make sure what is submitted is within industry standards, makes some logical sense, and isn't completely off. And generally what we find is they do have some comments, but it's more of creating additional informed thought about what's submitted and how to find some common ground to resolve whatever issues are out there.
Do we pay for that?
No, luckily we don't. Unfortunately, the Brennan Group and their associates do. Well, I guess fortunately for us.
Aye.
And I for myself.
Sorry.
And so now we need to continue.
I would make a motion to continue the hearing for 1263 Reservoir Road and 435 Leominster Shirley Road to September 27th, 2021 at 6:35 PM.
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So do we want to loop back to?
Why don't we do the decision, because I see Wes and Eric Fowler for 7-Eleven.
Okay. All right. So the next item on our agenda is 711 Massachusetts Ave to review and possibly vote to approve the site plan approval and stormwater management permit for that project. Has everyone taken a look at the draft decision?
No.
No, I haven't looked it over yet.
I had, did we get updated plans for this week? Or are they?
No, I think you had all the updated plans.
From last week.
Correct.
So I've got them here. It's just,
And what they had done is they had submitted just the sheets that they had altered. So when it's approved, they'll have to submit a final 2 sets for signature, but that's
okay.
fairly standard. That after you guys approve, we call them and say, okay, now we need the final set.
Yep.
So just a point, number 4 talks about hours of operation that we would have to fill in.
Correct. I have the Word document here, and I'll just print it and you guys can sign it. But without the board having made that motion, I didn't want to predispose anybody to.
I just had a question on the 30% thing and with the watershed protection area. And I know I asked the question at the last meeting what the percentage was, but I don't know that was ever reflected on the plan, so.
Well, I guess what I would say.
I can answer that for you if you want.
Well, what I would say at this point is you're in deliberation, so new information is not permissible. But if you wanted it included on the plan to memorialize it, you could condition that as a special condition.
Yep.
And that would be, simple enough to
take
They've
care
done the
of.
calculations, they've, stated what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, because at this point, the public hearing's closed.
Correct.
But we could do it as a condition.
Correct.
I'm pretty sure he said it was on the plan. Just
He did, and perhaps it is, and maybe it just was on one of the sheets, one of the note sheets. And if it's already on the plan, that condition kind of becomes fulfilling. It's already fulfilled.
Yeah.
That's a big if.
Mr. Bernie, if I could, I did actually state the number at the last meeting. I can repeat the number for you if you want.
Yeah, he wants it on the plan.
Yep, and that's fine.
Yeah, and at this point, the hearing's closed, so we really can't.
Well, he's saying he would just be restating what was already stated, so it wouldn't be new information.
No.
Well, if he said it was on the plan before, he could repeat that too.
True. I don't think it is on the plan, is the...
Okay.
I know one of the comments by the review engineer was regarded the deep hole testing to be performed prior to construction.
Right.
I don't know if we want to.
Yeah, that should be a condition.
The deep hole testing for what?
I believe it was for the info.
It was for the infiltration
Infiltration
basin.
basin.
They hadn't done all the testing.
Yeah, they should, because that should be built first. Well, they're certainly not supposed to traffic over it.
I have a question on number 18.
Hold on one sec.
Okay.
All right, so the 18?
Yeah, and I know this is from our standard conditions, so I'm sure we've already talked about this and it makes sense to people who aren't me. But we say a pre-construction meeting is required prior to commencement of site preparation and more. Do we specify anywhere else who is that meeting is?
We don't. You certainly could modify this condition to do so.
Do we need to modify this condition to do so? Otherwise, I'm turning to those with more experience on the board than me. Is
I
that
mean, one
relevant?
would infer that if it's for erosion control, it would either be the review engineer or the conservation agent, or both. Especially where this project is in Riverfront, the conservation agent will be looking to ensure that erosion control is in place prior to work being performed.
I would ask other members of the board if that seems relevant or if I am overthinking this one. And I'm very open to, Matt, you're overthinking this one.
I get that a lot. Well, as Adam said, there's multiple reasons for people to meet, and there's only a few reasons for specific groups to meet about something, so unless we got into the nitty-gritty of a meeting about what.
So as far as I don't have a strong feeling about stating who has to be at the meeting.
I mean, is this an industry standard thing that would happen, or is this?
If there's erosion control that's required, you would want it installed before you do too much site preparation or construction. So it wouldn't be uncommon for it to be inspected prior to. Once it's installed, to be inspected to make sure it's installed correctly.
Okay, because this doesn't say inspected by us or anything, or one of our But again, I'm using a very layman's reading here, so.
I don't have an issue with the way that's written, but
No, I don't either.
I would
Okay.
ask that it makes sense to me that an email goes out just so that everyone on the board is aware that here's the pre-construction meeting, so that if anybody does have an issue, you can attend the meeting.
Well,
And
only
that
two of you
being-
can.
It'd just be like a site visit. We're not deliberating.
Yeah, I guess so, yeah.
There's no business in front of us. At that point, the plan's already approved, right?
Mr. Chair, can I circle back to the testing? Sheet 5, under the general notes section, states that prior to construction, soil testing will be performed to confirm that the 2-foot groundwater offset is achieved. So that should be a condition.
So you said it's a note on the plan?
Yeah, it's, according to, I'm looking at the Graves Engineering. As stated on sheet 5, under the general notes section, note 17 states that prior to construction, soil testing will be performed to confirm if the 2-foot groundwater offset is achieved. GEI understands that the planning board will make a final determination relative to when the testing will occur.
So you're looking for a final determination in the decision?
Right, right. So I guess I would say that prior to construction, my requirement would be that prior to construction, soil testing must be performed to confirm that the 2-foot groundwater offset is achieved, and said testing data shall be provided to the Lunenburg Planning Board.
Okay, prior to construction, soil testing must be conducted. Can you pick it up from soil testing must be conducted?
To confirm that the 2-foot groundwater offset is achieved. Soil testing data must be submitted to the Lunenburg Planning Board.
Okay.
Any other concerns or conditions?
We need to talk about hours of operation.
Construction hours.
Okay.
Condition 4.
Well, I have a question on number 22. Isn't it a requirement that there's no off-site flooding, storm damage, or impact in these projects?
No.
There's stormwater.
But if it already floods, the approval of this project doesn't mitigate existing flooding. It doesn't mitigate 500-year storms. It
Right.
doesn't mitigate excessive rain, excessive groundwater, or otherwise. So it's a sort of catch-all that, yes, we've done our due diligence, we've reviewed and approved a plan that meets the standards that are required, but it does not solve any and all potential future woes.
Okay.
I mean, I can't count the number of times, not specifically in Lunenburg, but throughout my career that I have had people call and complain about flooding or other issues and point at a project when the issue was not specifically related to the project or was part of something that was well beyond any
Pre-existing
potential
condition.
control.
Right.
Circling back to hours of operations, 7 to 5 Monday through Friday, and 8 to maybe 4 on Saturday.
What's the standard? Is it 8 or 8:30?
I think it really depends on where you are on a Saturday, you mean?
Yeah.
You know, around a residence or residences, you might sometimes dial it back to 8:30 or 9. But I guess you know, if it's in a more commercial area, you might allow them to start at 8. I think the same thing could be said for the closing hours on a Saturday. In an area where there's a number of residences, you might button them up by noon, so people can enjoy an afternoon. But in a more commercial or a less densely populated residential area, you may allow them to go into 4.
Any thoughts? In 2A is part of the limited business district, so, you know, that's a pretty heavily traveled road, and there's plenty of activities around there.
And there's a vacant residence to one side of them and a business to the other.
Let them have at it, as far as I'm concerned.
That was my thought.
So 7 to 5 Monday through Friday, and 8 to 4 on Saturdays. No construction on Sundays or holidays.
I have a question on 30.
Yes.
The applicant must submit a copy of the approved access permit issued by the Mass DOT to who?
To the planning board office.
Yeah. And is that prior to anything? I mean, it's just kind of a open-ended statement.
Prior to occupancy.
I would think construction,
I would think construction as well.
Okey-doke.
because if they get denied, then they're not getting access to the site.
Right.
Okay.
We'll see what the DOT thinks of that corner.
They'll probably be thrilled that some grading's gonna be done to
Probably.
increase the
That site
visibility.
distance, yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, but all the grading's on the outside of the curve.
it'd be easier to, well, it'd be better to grade the other side of the road, but.
It would,
It's certainly not easy by any
No.
stretch of the imagination. Any other comments on the conditions? Everybody pretty
I don't have
well
any other comments.
satisfied?
I am.
Would we like to see the final draft before we vote to
I think he was gonna print
approve?
it now.
Doing it right now.
Excellent.
Not that printer, though. Be sitting in the Ritter building tomorrow morning. through it.
So hours of construction, 7 to 5, Monday through Friday, 8 to 4 on Saturday, no construction Sunday or holidays. And then,
The remainder of the bottom of the fifth page.
okay.
30 added the planning board office and prior to construction. 31 added the plan set reflecting the percentage of natural vegetation to be disturbed within the watershed protection district. And 32, prior to construction, soil testing must be conducted to confirm 2-foot groundwater offset is achieved. Soil testing data must be submitted to the Lunenburg Planning Board office.
On the soil testing, is that something that Graves weighs in on? How does that work? Because it wouldn't be Board of Health because it's not a,
Yeah, Graves would
Certified.
review that.
okay,
Right, and it would come to the office and you would forward it.
Yeah.
okay.
Do we specify that it's for the infiltration?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't hear him read that.
And I think on 31, it should clarify that must reflect the percentage of natural vegetation to be disturbed within the watershed protection district. This percentage shall not exceed, I believe it's 30%, right?
It's 30%.
Okay. And if there's nothing else, I would entertain a motion to approve the site, stormwater permit and site plan approval for 711 Massachusetts Ave.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Oh, no, what?
Yeah, we've got a nice mess of stuff here, huh?
Yeah. Whose idea was it to get full-size plan sets?
Oh, man.
You know, it's a little unwieldy, but I still love it.
They're fine at home. Here, I feel like we crinkle up the microphone pretty bad. What's our next agenda item here?
Well, we can go back to the water district.
Or go forward to Pleasant Street.
Well, there's nothing to talk about.
Oh, they continue.
They continue.
That's right. Yeah.
So, I mean, that becomes irrelevant in my opinion.
What are
But
you
my opinion
talking
doesn't
about?
really count.
The water district.
So the water district
Fine.
came back 18 months ago for an amendment to their site plan for their sign. And there was concern from the board that their sign exceeded the allowable size within that district. They have since changed council, and council reviewed the bylaws, spoke with the water district, and submitted an opinion to the building commissioner, to which he agreed that they are a, municipal or government entity, and thus enjoy the freedom to install a sign up to 24 square feet. So they're looking for de minimis change to install the granite sign that they had previously brought to the board, that included that because they hadn't previously in their site plan had a sign plan. So the board approved the project with the understanding they would come back to modify it for installation of the sign.
So that's based on the fact, on the decision that they're a municipality?
That they
They're
are,
a government unit.
a government unit.
How does that work? They're not part of the town. They have their own board. They have
They're
their
a
own meetings.
quasi-public private utility. They qualify for blue plates and are a subset
I got you.
of the state
I got you.
through the creation under the acts of the legislature. So therefore, okay, I'm actually going to have to reprint this, Eric. I'm sorry, you can't sign it. That's why the lines were there.
Oh. Yeah, that's my bad. I just.
No,
paused.
that's, you know what? I didn't say anything. It's my own fault.
No, it is my fault, Adam, and I am a horrible person, and that's the way it is.
Now I have to remember where it is.
So the action is to approve a de minimis change to allow the Lunenburg Water District.
To install their sign.
To install their, so I would make a motion to approve de minimis change for 496 Massachusetts Avenue, the Lunenburg Water District, to install the sign that they have proposed.
Second.
Just as a point of discussion, I feel like this is just a formality because their response is that no size limit is stated, so they'd be allowed to do it, right? Or are they exceeding the 24 square feet?
No, they it's part of their site plan approval that they come back to the board prior to the installation of the sign.
It was a condition.
So it's more related to their site plan than it is to the specific sign and size. The opinion is based on the fact that there was concern that their sign was too large, and this reflects that it is not too large, and the board would be capable of approving that alteration.
Okay, just for clarification purposes. Any other discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Excellent.
And we're not acting on 101 Pleasant Street, correct?
We're not acting on 101 because they have request a
Continuance.
continuance. So, moving on to minutes approval. Has everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes?
Yes.
Can we do it all as one motion, do you think?
Yeah, they're all 8:23, so.
So I would make a motion to approve the minutes of 8/23/2021. Motion to approve the minutes for 101 Pleasant Street on 8/23. Motion to approve the 711 Mass Ave, 8/23, 97 and 125 Cross Street, and 430 and 440 Mulpus Road, 8/23. 1263 Reservoir Road and 435 Leominster Shirley Road, 8/23. 360 Flat Hill Road, Scenic Road, 8/23, and 360 Flat Hill Road, Stormwater Management, 8/23.
I would second.
Any discussion on minutes? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Moving on to committee reports. TCP Building Design Committee.
Yes, I missed the last meeting, but I have reviewed the minutes, and I was at the previous meeting. There's a scramble to get 3 warrant articles on the warrant, 2 funding and 1 update. So the update will be the work that the committee has done since the last town meeting, and the one funding article will be to potentially fund the rebuild, the redesign, so basically funding the 21 million that we got with that last go-round.
To renovate the existing
Yes.
structure.
And then the second funding article would be to approve more money for studies, to look at the new, because they're giving us just a very rough estimate. So we're trying to scramble, get 3 articles.
So at last year's town meeting, there was an additional, I believe it was 50,000 allocated in engineering.
Possibly, yeah. I'm not quite sure. I don't remember the number.
That's the number that I recalled. Do they have an idea as to what they'd be looking to fund at this town meeting for study work?
I'm sure it came up, and I'm embarrassed to say I don't recall.
Well, we'll stay tuned on it. It's certainly a big project, so. AgCom.
AgCom, we did not meet. Our next meeting is this Thursday. The farmer's market is starting to wane off. We have 4 more Sundays.
All right. Stormwater Task Force.
We have not met, and I actually have a question for Adam.
Yeah, we actually have to schedule a meeting. It's been something that has fallen off, so I
Okay.
will get something out this week to everyone.
All right, thanks. Open space, we haven't met, and we're going to meet after Labor Day, but I don't have a date yet. Capital Planning is meeting tomorrow at 5 o'clock.
Excellent. Economic Development Committee. Mr. Brenner.
Did not meet this past month because there was no quorum.
Okay. MRPC and MJTC.
MJTC was canceled for the past month, so nothing there. MRPC, there are a few things that apply to Lunenburg. There's a climate change-related flood infrastructure report that's going to be coming out by September 30th and will be on the MRPC website. That's identifying basically key points of potential problems and failure with flooding, with climate change looming and the issues we're facing with that.
Is it going to change the floodplain maps?
I can I do not believe it is. I think they were
That's
just.
a separate project.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
And none of the maps in Lunenburg are changing.
Okay, that's key, because there's a lot of we have 2 high hazard dams.
Yeah,
so-
we may need to update our bylaw to reflect the new maps, but the maps themselves within the town borders aren't changing.
Okay, thank you.
And they haven't since the mid-'80s. I think that.
Yeah, I think 82.
The Roundabouts review, I mentioned that some time ago, they had started that. That is ongoing. Just as a general reminder, we have one pseudo roundabout by their reading over by the development on Whalum. And the Lunenburg Conservation Land Mapping Project is ongoing as well. No reports of progress on that. The other thing coming up that just doesn't really directly impact us and doesn't impact us right now, but is neat to know, is MRPC is applying for a grant to evaluate good areas for industrial zoning in the Montechusett region. Fun fact that came up that I actually thought was neat was that we employ people in manufacturing jobs, Montechusett region in general, at twice the rate the rest of the state does.
Wow.
We are the main, I don't know if that's per capita or in general, but we are comparatively much more dense with manufacturing jobs than the rest of the state. And so they are applying for a $400,000 grant with $100,000 down, which isn't required for this, but they're trying to sweeten the pot because it's going to be competitive. To kind of go through the region and identify key areas that either are already zoned industrial and look at what they have for resources in terms of what's the highway access really like, what's water and sewer like, as well as areas that could potentially might benefit from being zoned industrial if the town wanted, because there's good access and other features. So that grant application is going through. We obviously don't know that the $100,000 will be paid out of either. It's questionable how much will be paid out of DLTA funds versus how much will be paid out of operating expenses for MRPC, and kind of brought up from there because there was some debate about that from some of the smaller towns that don't have industrial areas.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, what percentage of the DLTA funding would go to this grant?
I think it was 25%, but I'd really have to, I don't have that. don't trust that
I
number.
I would be curious, because the DLTA funding is really important to communities, and I know it's something that we have utilized in the past, so I'd be curious to know what percentage.
Yeah, this was being put forward as a way to take some of that DLTA funding, do something DLTA related, and really, hopefully, leverage it to get a lot more done with it for the region. But you had some towns that understandably,
Right, because wouldn't benefit
Yeah.
them, and that's funding that is no longer available to them.
yeah, and the argument was that it would still likely benefit some of their residents who would potentially be working in these areas, but
Or ancillary businesses, or
Yeah.
support services, that kind of stuff.
And there was just a lot at this meeting, kind of pleasant for a change that way. And there was the one, going back through the notes, I thought I had this handy. I had mentioned before about the issue faced by not just not just MRPC, but all regional planning agencies, because of the state reinterpreting how they're supposed to be funding retirement, as opposed to how they have for years. And there's legislation that's been written, and it was either 9 or 10 regional planning agencies have signed on with that, so there's progress being made there. They said it would have to be a legislative solution, and that's the direction it's going.
Excellent. Thank you. Moving on to director's items,
All
special
right.
town meeting.
So, November 16th is our special town meeting. I did speak with the superintendent of the water district, and they have a proposed change to the watershed protection district that they're asking for the board to put on. It's a small addition along Lancaster Ave, and it's reflective of the way that the DEP is looking for them to now draw their Zone 2. So I can draft that for the next meeting for the board to vote on, as articles are due on the 28th, so the day after our meeting.
Right, I would want to see the article
Yeah,
as well
yeah.
as the map,
Yep.
obviously.
So, just FYI on that.
I have a question on that.
Yep.
Are they including the Keating well?
I believe the Keating well shows on that map that they have.
The Zone 1, 2, and 3?
I believe so.
Okay.
I don't think it's as big as you would expect it to be. The Zone 1, 2, and 3 on that. I mean, the 1 is as big as it is, but. Second, Uma Flowers, which is the cannabis retail establishment that is proposing to locate on Summer Street at the corner of Young's Road at Donley's Tavern, is holding their community outreach meeting on the 28th at 7 p.m. in this room. Be there, be square. I don't know if it will be a hybrid meeting or not, but I believe it will be broadcast and possibly recorded, which I think is why they're having it here. And the master plan, we got a total of 0 bids. We had half a dozen or so people request the RFP. The assistant town manager reached out to those folks who did, and the general consensus was, you don't have enough money to do what you're trying to do.
Not uncommon.
So, the board can take 2 things away from this. We can, or you can go in 2 different directions. We can contact MRPC, give them the RFP, and say, what is your quote for this work? Or we can chop one of the chapters off and go out to bid for a single chapter for the amount that we have.
Or town meeting.
Or you can go to town meeting and ask for a
Or
bunch of
do
more
all of
money.
these things simultaneously.
Yeah. And I mean, town meeting is going to be probably the spring, because you have capital money. And so you'd probably be having to look to extend the current capital funding and add additional.
Do we have any idea how much additional?
I mean, I can reach out. It's not we haven't got into the capital planning stage yet. I would suggest that if we were going to do that, it would probably be better to go and ask for the whole thing and see if you can get a full funded master plan, rather than trying to piecemeal it, because you might save money hiring one consultant to do the whole thing, because some of the public participation, some of the data gathering, it's all going to tie together into one. So while 43,000 might not get you 2 chapters, 150 might get you a whole plan.
That doesn't even make sense to me, but that's okay.
But it does, because if one person takes on the whole plan, then the mobilization,
scale.
the mobilization becomes smaller, and the amount of focus on that one community, you say, well, look, I know I've got 9 months worth of work here, and it's all going to tie together, and I can really dig in and spend my time doing this, as opposed to, well, I'm just trying to piecemeal this little bit of this other thing.
Is 150,000 enough?
I don't know. I'm pulling a number out of the air. I mean, it's an educated guess, but I can reach out to my fellow planning drones and find out.
I think that's important. I mean, the capital planning committee is just starting to gear up again, so I think it's important. And you think you can get any responses before the next meeting?
When's your next meeting?
No, our next meeting.
Oh, yes, our next meeting, yeah.
9/27.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what is our total left on what we got?
43.
43.
Okay. I mean, it's 43 and like some change, but yeah.
Because we used a portion of
We
that
use
for the
6,000 and
population.
change for the population.
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to handing the RFP to MRPC and see what their thoughts are on it. I mean,
there's no harm in that.
Days of time off. The only thing that comes to mind is we went through the capital planning process to get the original $50,000. Yet other similar projects, in my mind, the engineering over at TCP simply went to town meeting with an article for the entire amount.
Sure, and I can speak to the town manager about that, and if that's what you would prefer to do, we can pursue that. I don't know which is better. I mean, you kind of have the same argument, you have the same debate about the spending either way.
I don't agree necessarily, because I think the capital planning committee makes a decision on what to fund, and we may or may not be included in the dollar amount that's brought to the town. And we don't have an opportunity to present the argument about the need for the master plan as a planning board. And it is our duty to do this. And I think that it's not optional anymore.
Well, and then the other piece of that puzzle, from my perspective, would be that if you go through the capital planning process, you are taking money from other departments. I mean, it's a competitive process. There's always more needs than there is space on the plan. And so by default, if we ask for $100,000 additional, that is coming at the expense of another department. Whereas if we...
Well, but I think from the same token, such as the same if you go to town meeting with an outside article, I mean, there's only one pot of money, and I understand that the capital plan comes from the free cash, and that's a dedicated funding, but then the other funding, wherever it comes from, it's competing against other needs. And so I guess what I'm thinking is hearing what you're saying, Paul, it makes sense. Capital planning starts now. We'll know before any warrant comes due whether or not they've included us, and at that point, potentially looking at including an outside article. The issue then, to me, becomes where do we fund it from? And that's going to need buy-in from the town manager and the
Right, and
finance director, but I think those are
And they
there.
have an opportunity to weigh in on that at town meeting, but personally, I believe as a planning board, we have an obligation to try to fulfill our duties, and our duties is to do a master plan.
Correct, and I'm saying if we put an outside article, we can't just put it on without any funding.
Of course we can. Of course we can. We can submit an article, and then at the time, the town manager it may become a mess at town meeting, but we certainly don't have to identify the funding source. It's very often that entities put, right, reserve and appropriate, and then when the motion is made, and oftentimes it's then determined where the money's gonna come from, but it is not incumbent upon us when we submit the article.
And just to clarify, my point is, we went through capital planning for the first $50,000, and that in the whole scheme of things is a relatively small amount when the capital planning process usually involves about $1 million worth of purchases. But now where we're looking at potentially $100,000 or more, now, from my perspective, it dominates a much bigger part of that process. And I feel bad either way. If we don't get picked through the capital planning process, then the town doesn't get the master plan. If we do get picked, we get picked at the expense of another department. A truck doesn't get purchased for the fire department, or a cruiser doesn't get purchased, or the school doesn't get something. So having it as a standalone article frees up space on the capital planning process and lets the town evaluate that one item on their own. I mean, I'm not saying I'm outright opposed to going through capital planning, but I think there's a lot to be said about just doing it separately. But nonetheless, we need to keep trying to move forward, so. Circling back to special town meeting, you're going to prepare the article for the watershed. I think we also need an article to address the fact that the limited business district has no dimensional requirements, and my simple thought was to update the
Just add
chart.
it to the table.
Yeah, just add it to the table and give it the same dimensional requirements as the residential lots, because ultimately everything behind limited business is
So
Residence
make
A.
it equivalent to Residence A?
Yeah. So, and I understand there's probably more work we could do in that section of the bylaw.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're looking to solve a simple,
Yeah, and just add it to the chart in that way.
so we'll just schedule a public hearing for the October meeting,
Okay. That
because we'll
makes
have to
sense.
do that.
Yep. Anything else?
Nope.
With director's items? So our meeting schedule is the second and fourth Mondays here at Town Hall, 6:30 PM. Our next meetings are September 27th and October 25th, because we missed the
Columbus
early
Day.
October meeting to Columbus Day. Ongoing items, Pondview Commons.
The letter was sent by the town manager to Mass Housing. We don't have any further information at this time.
Is it possible to get a copy of the letter that was sent?
Yeah,
That'd be great, thank
I'm
you.
assuming it was a packet that was sent?
it was. The town manager wrote a letter and then included all of the additional letters that were
So if
sent.
it's possible, I would be very interested to see the packet that was sent.
Do you recall the deadline? That,
It was like the beginning of September. It was,
but then does Mass Housing have a deadline?
they don't.
Okay.
I think
so-
they said it's usually 90 days or so.
Okay, so conceivably early December,
Yeah, I mean, I would expect before or around New Year, we would know.
okay. Any public comment?
None on there.
No public to comment. Any board comment?
Somewhat of a question. MRPC, they give us traffic counts every year. When did they ask us for the
You know, I don't know that they've asked us the last couple of years.
So then maybe we should let them know that we're looking for some, my recommendation would be Leominster Shirley Road.
We always get a memo saying that they're, if we want to be included in the traffic counts.
And we gave our DLTA money to conservation for the trails?
For the trails,
For
yeah.
twice now, right?
We didn't give our DLTA money. We gave our GIS hours.
hours, that's right.
DLTA is a competitive application
Right,
process.
and they do, the conservation does have DLTA money, that's how they're doing the mapping.
With the
And the,
traffic,
and something else too, I can't remember what it is.
Yeah, they
Might
got
be
the 26 grant, they've got all the trail markers.
trail markers, yeah.
with the traffic count work, is it possible to identify a couple of points?
It depends. They do fixed points. So they have areas they count every year or every 3 years. And on a cycle, they will ask if there are additional areas we want counted. And they ask us for a list of recommendations. And usually the town in the past has ranked them and given like the top 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then if they're able to do it, they include it. They go and put their counters out and do it over a 72-hour period usually.
Okay.
Oh, I would add Howard Street to that list as well.
Howard Street, yeah, I know one.
And actually, rather than just asking for it, see which ones they've done recently. I mean, if we've got, within a couple of years, it's probably close enough. But I don't think we have anything pressing, so it wouldn't hurt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all of their data is available on their website.
But not if they don't go out there and take it.
No, but I mean, so it's easy to see what they've done.
Right.
And I don't know what the pandemic has done to their traffic counting program. I don't know about them. I know other regional planning agencies I've worked with often used interns. And so I don't know if with the pandemic, internships were curtailed because of...
They've still had interns during this time.
Have they?
Yep.
Okay. So I'll reach out and find out.
Very good, thank you. And also a follow-up on on my committee report for TCP. Pretty sure recollection serves me correct that it's going to be a very similar analysis to the previous reuse of the building, so it's probably going to be the same ask for design documents. Design document level for a new building versus a renovate.
Using the same program and just...
Well, I mean, we're going to use the data that we've already put together from our studies for the space use. We're not-
Yeah, that's what I mean, the same
Yeah.
space
So
program
it's gonna be
and
like-
laying it out differently.
Like 230 to 250, I think it was, that we asked last year for the...
Well, the original ask was 250.
Yeah.
And that was for the renovate. And then at last year's town meeting, my memory tells me it was an additional $50,000.
It was. That's my recollection as well.
For the new building, and that was based on the fact that 250 had been spent to understand the space needs, and so they had all the information that they needed to build out enough of the new building to get a cost estimate.
Right.
They wouldn't have like finish level engineering documents, but they would have enough of the new building, designed out so that they could get a cost estimate, so. But I'm not sure at what point in the process they're at now, but.
Yeah, so to regurgitate, I think that the 250 for the investigation of a new building and the 21 million for the already come up with number for renovation are going to be the two asks.
Yeah. Well, we'll stay tuned. Any other board comments or concerns?
I do. And this is just kind of thinking possibly years ahead, but I remain concerned, as I've voiced at meetings, about, and as others have said in different formats, but, okay, we've developed all the easily developable land in Lunenburg. Congratulations. Now we're on to stuff that requires these ridiculous, I mean, when I say ridiculous, I don't mean ridiculous like we shouldn't have them, when I'm talking about stormwater and retention basins and everything else. It's not that we shouldn't have them, but that we're developing land that requires this huge amount of work and then ongoing work from homeowners that we're kind of crossing our fingers to a certain extent, keeps being done well. We're putting in the best safeguards we can under our current bylaws. I'm left wondering if we need to look in the future at other options for residential development in town. And I don't know what that would look like, but we keep making we make a lot of these long neck lots that kind of go off and then have the weird, the odd shapes, the bizarre or the necessary drainage issues being solved. I'm wondering if there's a solution that my gut says maybe it looks something like we allow more dense development next to the road in exchange for leaving the woods the heck alone. And I don't know what is doable by state regulation or anything, but this is just something that's crossed my mind, that maybe there's another way other than people keep carving deeper and deeper and making these developments that have a bigger impact, that we can maybe build smaller, and if it's possible, put it into the regulation so it still matches the agricultural character of the town, however we would quantify that. But that would then maybe have a lesser environmental impact.
I mean, the state has created a new model bylaw for open space residential development that does it by right and requires conventional development by special permit. So, the board could look at that. I think what that sort of looks like from the way I would look at it, and I think it probably sort of echoes some of what you're saying, is the board would be looking at a 50% or so reduction in lot size in order for retention of the rest of that lot size as open space. The issue we as a community will run into with that is black water disposal, septic systems. Because once you start putting houses on 20,000 square foot lots, getting a septic system that meets the 4-bedroom requirement is difficult. So then you're into group treatment systems, which are a pitfall in and of themselves because they require an operator, they require long-term maintenance. And that's not to say that they can't be done. They tend to be more expensive, but maybe that's okay. And we had an issue here in town at one location, and sort of throughout northern Worcester County, was it 3 or 4 years ago, where someone was falsifying logs for that, and there was a big fallout from that. I don't know how difficult these systems are to maintain or how expensive, but it does then fall back on the owners, and we get into the road issue, and is it a town road, is it not, and so I mean that there are ways to do it. Some communities, and again these tend to be more urban communities, have started turning towards micro communities where you have a series of smaller houses or lots that sort of face a common courtyard surrounded by either fence or woods and small parking areas. Again, I think some of it is getting people to accept that type of development and how it blends with the fabric of what we have otherwise. So, I mean, there's certainly ways to do it. It just, the board would have to really kind of want to do it and come together with direction on what they wanted to craft out of that.
I appreciate you mentioning the micro communities, because one of the ideas that stuck in my head is I have several friends who developed a co-housing project in Berlin years ago. And I'm not advocating let's all go co-housing, because you'll notice a lot of my friends are there and I'm not. But there are models of the construction style they used that, I mean, it feels nice, it feels rural. The houses are all connected by walking paths with public, with, you know, parking for the development separately. The impact's lower, but it has some, it doesn't look like the condo townhouses I used to live in. It looks appropriate. It would, I feel like it would blend here, or there might be something that does. I'm just putting that idea out there because I don't personally see the path we're on as sustainable in the long term. And whether or not, I mean, we could develop the whole town with the path we have now. I just think we're still setting ourselves up for future issues. And I don't know that it's ecologically our best choice either.
And I just want, just a point of clarification, the stormwater requirements aren't based on land being not great. They're based on the Phase 2 permit for Massachusetts evolving into its second phase. And in theory, in 5 years or 10 years, it's going to evolve again. But, you know, the original permit was in 2003. It was a 5-year permit that they reissued in 2017. So when I say 10 years, it could probably be 20. And, you know, but that's really the impetus, not necessarily the land or the value or the ability to develop it, but the regulations that keep trickling down from the federal government.
But undisturbed land generally doesn't.
Correct, yes.
So I guess that's where my thought is.
Yeah.
When I talk about let's maybe develop small, maybe there's a way to incentivize developing smaller areas that can also lead to more, again, not affordable housing, but housing that's affordable, which.
To maintain the natural ecosystem better.
So we maintain the ecosystem, we might be maybe allowing people to develop housing that's affordable, which we're going to need in the long term if we want people who are growing up in Lunenburg to stay in. If I want my kids, for example, to be able to live in Lunenburg, we couldn't afford to just move into Lunenburg right away. We lived in Fitchburg for over a decade before we could get a house in town that was right for us. And I'd love for people in town to be able to stay in town too, and have that option. These are all values I'm trying to wonder if we have another avenue for. I'm not saying we come up with a solution tonight or even this year with other things at our plate, but it's something I want to have out there because I think it's relevant for the future of this town, and maybe something as well to see if the public agrees with during the master planning process when we're soliciting opinions, because that would directly impact that. Thank you. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Good night.
Is this pile yours or mine?
I think that's you. I'm sorry? I think this is all me.
Okay. Yeah, no, there are.
I think I got it all.
They can be done in a way. Yes, I think put it over.
Like I said, that's co-housing, but
Town meeting only approved 1 quart of meat.
Well, it's better than the coffin that used to be there.
with a separate parking.
The coffin that used to be there. Wasn't that a coffin?
Yeah, it was full of old town meeting.
It's co-housing.